Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we will be talking about what is programming for beginners. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is Zia. I'm a software engineer and I talked about software engineering, programming, and technologies in general on this channel. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell to get more videos from me every Tuesday and Thursday. Okay, let's get into it. So recently I started thinking of making a series about how anyone, a beginner who's never had any programming experience, can understand how a complex app like Facebook is built. I will start by explaining what programming is and start building that towards how you can take all these basic simple concepts, ideas, and slowly build your way towards an app like Facebook. If you're interested in checking out that series, click that like button on this channel and leave a comment letting me know what sort of content you would like to see in that series. Today, I will try to explain what programming is in the most simple basic terms so that any beginner who's never had any programming experience would be able to understand. A common analogy used to explain programming is the idea of a cookbook, a recipe, for example, right? When you're trying to cook a meal, you usually have a recipe that lists out what are the materials that you need and what are the steps that you need to take in order to create a meal. Those are very clear instructions, step-by-step instructions that walks you through what you need to do in order to create a meal. In software engineering terms, you have input and output. The input are the materials, the ingredients that you have prepared. The output here is the actual meal itself. In between, you have a number of steps that you need to take in order to transform those ingredients into a meal. So you have your input, you have your instructions, and you have your output. At a really high level, that's what programming really is. You have many sets of different ingredients being put into, you can imagine, this black box, and this black box would execute a bunch of instructions in there, and it produces this output, the meal that you are expecting. So that's at a high level what programming is all about. Now, let's take that one step further and look at how we can apply this concept that we've just learned, input, instructions, and output, into actual data. So I think that in this background, it might not be really easy to explain. So let me take you into a slightly different environment so that I can explain my idea much more easily. All right, let's get to it. Boom. All right, this is much better. So we have a whiteboard here and we will be using this whiteboard to explain the ideas of programming. Okay, the first thing here is programming. Like I mentioned earlier, let's keep this in mind. Programming has three components. One, you have your input. Two, you have your set of instructions. And three, you have your output. Okay? At a high level, here's what programming is about. You have your input, instructions, and output. Let's take an example of how we can apply that to a programming problem. So let me give you an example of a programming problem. Given a set of numbers, I want you to transform them and split them into even numbers and odd numbers. So the first thing here is the input, where I just gave you there a set of numbers that will serve as your input. Instructions, this is the second step. This is still a big question mark for now, but we will get into what the instructions that we need to do in order to get to the third step here, which is the output. So in terms of output here, it is pretty clear what I want you to do. I want you to create a set of odd numbers and even numbers from the input. Usually, that's what we ask in a programming interview question. You're given some set of input, you're being told what the output should be. It is up to you as a software engineer to figure out what do you need to do to produce the instructions to come up with the output. Let's take this example and let me explain how it looks. This is your input, and the output that I want you to produce here is you have your even numbers and your odd numbers. For even numbers, you have your 2 and 4. For odd numbers, you have 7, 9, and 1. From here, you can see pretty clearly this is the input, and these are your output. This big question mark in the middle is the instruction that you as a software engineer is supposed to come up with. How would you do something like this? Now with this said, let's walk through how you can kind of come up with this output. What we could do at a really high level would be something equivalent to take every number in this input, like say 7 for example. So to determine if a number is even or odd, we need to do some checking there. How will you check if a number is even or odd? I will give you 5 seconds to think about how will you check. Let's do it. So to check a number to figure out if it is even or odd, in math you have this simple idea, right? You have 7 divided by 2, 3, 6, and you have a remainder of 1. Okay? So when you have a remainder from that number, when it's divided by 2, that means that number is odd. So you put 7 into that bucket of odd numbers. 7, and you crossed it out. The next step, you take the next number and you apply that same logic again. So you check. 9 divided by 2, 4, 8, and again you have a remainder of 1. So that means that 9 is an odd number. So you put 9 into this bucket of odd numbers and you cross it out. Next, you check the next number. Now you take 2. Now you take 2 and divide 2 by 2. Okay? So 1, 2, 0. So there's no remainder when 2 is divided by 2. That means 2 is an even number. In this case, you would take 2 and put it to the bucket of even numbers. And you cross it out to indicate that you've processed these 3 numbers already. And you apply that same logic multiple times. Notice how powerful this thing is because right now we only have 5 numbers, 7, 9, 2, 1, 4 in this set, but you can apply that same logic for hundreds, thousands, or millions of numbers out there. The idea, the instructions that you need here to separate them out into even and odd doesn't change. That's the power of automation, that's the power of programming. Because you can take that same input, apply that same set of instructions, and you get the same output every single time. Now, let's look at what are the set of instructions that you need in order to do this. First, what do you need to do? First, you need to take each number and check if remainder is 1. So that is the first step here. You take each number in your input and you check once divided by 2 if the remainder is equivalent to 1. If it is 1, that means it's an odd number. If it is not 1, that means it is an even number. Okay? So the second step here is you check if remainder equals to 1, put in odd basket. So that's the second step. And the third step here is otherwise or else put in even bucket. Okay? So at high level, those are the 3 steps that you need to take. 1. You take each number in this set and you check if the remainder is 1. 2. If the remainder is 1, then put it into your odd basket. And 3, if it is not remainder equals to 1, then you put it in the even basket. And that at a high level is what programming is all about. Here's an example of the code I would write to split the input into even and odd numbers. So I fired up this is what we call a text editor. This allows me to write code that would execute the instructions to take the input and turn it into the output that I want. Okay, as mentioned earlier, we have this input where, so I'm gonna call this input, or let's call it numbers, and we had 7, 2, 1, 9, and 4. Okay, so this is our starting input. Now the desired output here is turn it into 2 sets of numbers. One is odd numbers, so you have 7, 9, 1, and you have your even numbers, which are 2 and 4. Okay, so we now know that here are the output. So let's take a look at how you would write code to split the numbers into odd and even numbers. In Python, what we can do here, we can define a function. So a function is a chunk of code that you execute when it is being called. So for example, here I would call it define. So def stands for define, split numbers into even and odd. So that is the definition of the function that we are going to make. And we will give it the numbers to execute on. Okay. So with that said, remember our algorithm there where we take every single number and we check if the remainder after divided by 2, is it equals to 1? So in Python, a simple way of doing that would be for number in numbers. So what this means is take every number in the numbers set and you want to apply a function. So in computer science, we have a way of doing this mod2. Okay? So this is the equivalent of checking if the remainder after dividing by 2 is equals to 1. If it is, this is the odd case, else it is the even case, right? Because when a number divided by 2, if the remainder is not 1, that means it is an even number. Okay? So also right here, I will define odds. Okay? So I'm creating a set or a list, an empty list for now. And also another empty list for even numbers. Okay? So now what we'll do here then is odds dot append a number. What this does is you are adding this number into the set of odd numbers. And you can do the same for the even set as well. There you go. So at the end of it, we can print. Here are the even numbers. And you want to do something here, which is you want to convert your list of numbers into a string. So I won't explain too much what that does right now, but let's just assume that this thing works the way it is. String and odds. Okay, perfect. So let's write this code here. Split numbers into even and odd, and we give it numbers. I'm gonna comment this thing out, but that should be our desired output. Okay, so let's run this code. And there you go. Here are the even numbers, 2 and 4. Here are the odd numbers, 7, 1, and 9. So that matches our output right there. And this code is the algorithm to split your numbers into even and odd numbers. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button and leave a comment below on what you would like to see, what sort of content you would like to see in my future videos. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!